This program contains graphic material, including offensive language. Viewer discretion is advised. They're trained mercenaries.
This is a gang like you've never seen before.
Their code of silence unparalleled. Their ruthlessness unquestioned.
They are killing machines. Killing machines with no soul.
Los Zetas are one of America's deadliest gangs, and those who stand in their way pay a gruesome price.
They burn these individuals in a 55-gallon drum using diesel because diesel burns slower.
They've had people's heads cut off, thrown into a disco.
The gang already rules Mexico, and now their sights are set on controlling this side of the border.
The Zetas have more capability than Al-Qaeda does today to operate inside the United States.
The mighty Rio Grande separates the United States and Mexico. Laredo, Texas sits on its banks. Across the water is the Mexican city of Nuevo Laredo. The river is shallow and slow-moving here, making it easy to cross illegally.
It's always a group of 8 to 10 subjects that cross it over, and there's always somebody waiting for them. You can see the tire tracks right here on the grass, tire tracks over here in the mud. Just recently, they crossed something over. We had some rain yesterday, and those are fresh tire marks right now.
Spanning the Rio Grande is the World Trade Bridge, the main connector of the two countries. Some 6,000 trucks travel northbound across the bridge into the U.S. daily. But not everything that crosses the border is wanted.
A lot of product passes through. But what I can personally say, what you can move, not what others can move. Let's say about 500 kilos a month.
Los Zetas smuggle thousands of tons of narcotics across the U.S. border. The drugs are worth billions. In Spanish, Zeta is the letter Z. The gang took its name from the tactical radio call sign for commanders in the Mexican army. Los Zetas are universally feared, highly trained, and armed as well as any military.
The amount of weaponry, grenades, grenade launchers that are available to the Zetas and are utilized by them is just unbelievable.
And they don't hesitate to use them.
They're business first, and if you get in the way of their business, they're gonna kill you.
It's very risky standing next to the river right now with my uniform on and looking straight over there because there can be a sniper from a drug cartel looking at us from those bushes over there, and the Zetas can be watching me right now with a sniper rifle.
The first objective is to kill.
28-year-old Elisar is an elite Zeta assassin in prison for multiple murders. He describes a bloody network of killers that extends north and south of the Rio Grande.
The Zetas have contacts on both sides of the border, in the American side and on the Mexican side. The commander gives the order to kill, and the soldiers take care of locating and killing the target.
Elisar asked to have his identity concealed. He has never spoken about his involvement with the gang and fears execution, even behind bars. Elisar carried out his mercenary murders on the Mexican side of the border, where Zetas rule the streets.
The Zetas that work in Mexico can do it openly. You can go around in a bulletproof truck. On the other side, you cannot drive in a convoy of 20 or 30 trucks like we do in Mexico.
Los Zetas are brazen in their brutality, and according to Elisar, there is no end to the resources they can tap to carry out their missions.
They can buy anything they want. Commercial airlines, private jets, helicopters, all the drugs they want. They have so much money, it will never run out.
Money is indispensable for everything, and since we have it, if we have a need for tools or for certain technology, we buy it, and that's all.
Los Zetas have used their resources to control Mexico for years. Recently, they've expanded their reach into the United States.
They're trying to take over this territory right here, and they're gonna do whatever it takes. If that means killing people in broad daylight, that's what they're gonna do. If that means that they're gonna shoot at a law enforcement officer, that's what they're gonna do.
America needs to wake up and smell the coffee. The violence is right here. You know, you want to compare them to Al-Qaeda, these individuals are knocking down our door, just terror, pure terror.
Rosalio Reta grew up in a large, poor family in Laredo, Texas.
Rosalio Reta is the son of, you know, a couple of parents, hardworking parents who raised 8 other kids besides him, none of whom have ever run askew of the law in any way.
Enticed by large sums of money, he jumped at the opportunity to become a Zeta at 13 years old. By 16, Reta was a killer cruising the streets of Laredo, carrying out hits. The Zeta's cleaner, he carried out his orders with ruthless efficiency. December 2005, a drug dealer and member of the Mexican Mafia, Moises Garcia, was eating lunch with his pregnant wife and son at this Laredo restaurant. Outside, a white Ford SUV cased the joint.
When Moises Garcia gets out from the restaurant, loads his family into his car, he backs out like that, and the white expedition just come in like that.
With the SUV blocking his exit, an unknown man jumped out with a 9mm handgun and began firing execution style.
I know that his wife was pregnant at the time, but they gunned him down, and they actually got off the vehicle, and they went up to him and made sure that he was dead.
The local authorities suspected the murder was the work of Los Zetas, retaliation for dealing drugs on their turf. But before they could make any arrests, the gang struck again. The next victim was 27-year-old Noe Flores. Flores and his brother were lured out of their house by an ex-girlfriend. Once outside, an unknown man jumped out of a car and shot Noe twice in the back.
He proceeds to stand over him and empty his clip with a couple of kill shots to the head.
The tragedy was that Noe was not the intended target. He was mistaken for his brother, who had a hit put out on him for dating the ex-girlfriend of a high-ranking Zeta. The Laredo PD now had 2 homicides and few leads. Then, another brutal shooting. Jesus Resendez, a local marijuana smuggler, and his nephew were heading north out of Laredo.
The victim approached the red light here at the corner of Sierra Vista and 83 South. When he stopped at a red light, the hitmen, they just came behind him, parked right behind him, exited their vehicles, and with AK-47s and M16s, killed the victim, shooting the car multiple times and shooting the victims multiple times.
Just to be sure, when that car left, there was another one that pulled up on the opposite side, and then you saw another 3 to 4 individuals get up and start spraying him. It's straight out of Hollywood, and you just didn't think that anybody could possibly want somebody dead that bad, to the point where it's just complete overkill.
It was the 3rd brazen murder by Los Zetas in 5 months. The residents of Laredo, Texas were terrified.
Well, we had 2 murders in broad daylight here in Laredo. And at that point, we knew that things were not going to get better.
Los Zetas are not only willing to kill their enemies, they're willing to sacrifice the innocent to get what they want. September 17th, 2004. 27-year-old Yvette Martinez and her friend Brenda Cisneros, both Laredo residents, drove across the border and into Nuevo Laredo to see a concert at a local fair.
It's the same fair that I went as a child, and so we didn't think anything of it.
2 days later, when the women still hadn't returned, Yvette's stepfather, William Slaymaker, went looking for them. He found her car in an impound lot on the outskirts of Nuevo Laredo.
First thing I did, I had a Slim Jim in my car. I went, popped her car open, make sure there was any, blood or anything in there. There was not.
Fearing the worst, he went to the Mexican police and the U.S. consulate. Both refused to help. He ran into dead ends until he started knocking on the doors of known drug dealers. They told him something terrifying.
I found out that they had been pulled over by a police officer, taken to the police station, and from there, my understanding is that they were given as gifts to members of the Zetas organization.
Los Zetas. This secretive and ruthless mercenary gang controls the U.S. border between Laredo, Texas, and Nuevo Laredo, Mexico. On the Mexican side, they flaunt their power, patrolling city streets in armored Humvees. While on American soil, they operate more covertly, torturing and murdering their victims. Elazar, a Zeta assassin, admits he's killed countless people.
You do what you have to do, whether you have to kill them all or only one person. If you have to kill the entire family will die.
You're dealing with people that are no longer capable of feeling any humanity whatsoever.
For the past several years, Los Zetas have been at war with their chief rival, the Sinaloa Cartel, for control of the I-35 corridor. It is the main line into the U.S. interstate system, running from Laredo to Duluth, Minnesota. It feeds directly into more than a dozen other highways. The corridor is the holy grail for drug traffickers. At stake, the most lucrative narcotics zone in the world.
They wanted the I-35 corridor. Everybody was fighting for it.
Los Zetas started out as the enforcement arm of the Mexican Gulf Cartel. The cartel formed in the early 1930s as a family operation, smuggling whiskey into the U.S. from Mexico during Prohibition. The gang's illegal activities evolved in the 1990s when the cartel saw an opportunity to get into the cocaine business. For decades, Colombia's Pablo Escobar, the king of cocaine, had controlled the drug smuggling trade. In 1993, Colombian and American special ops teams cornered and killed him in Medellin. That marked the end of Colombia's dominance of the drug trade. Mexico's Gulf Cartel stepped in to fill the void.
The center of gravity for narcotics has now moved to Mexico. The reason for it is all about geography, because whoever has the geography is going to control the very lucrative gateways into the United States, and that's the prize.
The Gulf Cartel was led by the Mexican Escobar, OCL Cardenas. The gang dominated the drug trade routes along Mexico's eastern seaboard. There was just one problem. A rival cartel, the Sinaloa, wanted the same territory.
Sinaloa has been fighting for a long time to gain access from the Gulf Cartel. The corridor is so important to the drug cartels because that's how they move their supplies.
OCL Cardenas needed more muscle. He had the idea to hire elite soldiers from the Mexican army to serve as the cartel's security force. The original recruits were trained for our Mexican allies by U.S. soldiers at Fort Benning, Georgia.
They've been trained in military tactics to the standard that we would train our military forces that are deployed in Iraq, for example.
These elite soldiers were hired by the Gulf Cartel at salaries much higher than what the Mexican military could offer.
The cartels start to rise in power, and the cartels have the money to be able to pay for protection.
By 1999, OCL Cardenas had recruited dozens of these soldiers to battle the Sinaloa and protect the interests of the cartel.
They basically abandoned their military positions, went to work for the Gulf Cartel as their military strong arm.
The group took the name Los Zetas, the radio call sign for commanders in the Mexican army. Part of their job was to guard people like Jose's father, a high-ranking drug wholesaler for the Gulf Cartel.
My father was crazy. He was one of the first who worked for the original Zetas.
Jose asked to have his identity concealed. He fears Los Zetas might kill his wife and children.
Since I was a kid, I would tell my father, I want to be like they are. But my father would say, they're not going to get very far.
By 1999, Jose's dad was moving 500 kilos of cocaine every month.
He didn't have a day of rest. Every day he worked passing drugs. Every day he handled money. There was not a day in which he didn't do that.
When Jose was 7, his family suddenly became wealthy.
I remember that he began to fix the house, buy newer cars, clothes. He started to change.
Jose never saw them kill anyone, but he says Los Zetas murdered hundreds, possibly thousands of people as their attempts to control the border intensified. At the center of their efforts was the quiet town of Nuevo Laredo.
Nuevo Laredo was a beautiful city at one time. Growing up, my mom used to take us as kids to go and eat and to take us to the carnival. We thought it was fairly safe.
It all changed on March 15th, 2003, when Cardenas was captured by the Mexican military and sent to prison. A full-blown drug war erupted on the streets of Nuevo Laredo as the Sinaloa cartel mobilized to capture the Gulf Cartel's territory.
It started like an explosion. It affected everyone. Everyone was living in fear.
Sinaloa would send in assassins. The Gulf Cartel would then turn around and fight them in the middle of the streets. Innocent people would be lost in the crossfire.
Both sides had a seemingly endless supply of weapons. AK-47s, semi-automatic rifles, bazookas, and piñas. Los Zetas showed no mercy, throwing piñas into crowded public spaces, decapitating policemen and civilians. No one was safe.
You can read in the newspaper that 2 or 3 people have been executed every single day.
2003 ended with more than 80 murders in Nuevo Laredo alone.
The fighting would continue and continue until the streets were filled with blood. They would pick up the bodies before anyone ever arrived, throw them into the back of trucks, and drive out of town with them.
The message was clear. Don't dare mess with Los Zetas.
They are going to kill you. They are going to put a contract on you, and they are going to kill you.
June 8th, 2005. Nuevo Laredo prepared to welcome Alejandro Dominguez as its new police chief.
This police chief, had a lot of tough talk. He let the Mexican people know, let the cartels know that he was there to do his job, that he meant business.
Dominguez was sworn in that afternoon. 6 hours later, an SUV pulled up alongside the police chief's truck. Los Zetas unloaded more than 40 rounds from their assault rifles. Dominguez died at the scene.
You have a very honest man that's trying to do the right thing for the safety of his family and his city. He felt this was the right thing to do. By the end of the day, he's dead.
That very same day in Laredo, Texas, Mexican drug cartels murdered 2 other people they considered threats. One, a former policeman, was shot leaving work at 2 in the afternoon. The other was killed outside a Mercedes dealership, where he was getting his car serviced. Los Zetas seemed invincible, but the leader of the Sinaloa cartel was still determined to take over the Laredo corridor. Later that year, a videotape was circulated on both sides of the border. It showed 4 men, hands tied, sitting with a black tarp behind them. They had clearly been beaten.
When you have plastic bags on the backdrop, you know something's going to happen. You know that they don't want to stain something.
The 4 hostages were Zetas, who'd been captured by members of the Sinaloa. They were forced by their captors to divulge information about some of their recent crimes, including the killing of a Mexican reporter.
¿Quién le mandó a matar? Omar Treviño. Y pues se la ejecutaron. Y también a otro reportero también le secuestraron a su hija.
It's frightening to look into the eyes of these men, knowing that they're just as bad, that they're killers too, but that they're facing their last minutes on Earth.
A mí me contrató Iván Treviño para Nuevo Laredo, para levantar gente y matar gente, ya que la plaza pertenece a los Zetas.
We believe that even though they show only 1 person being executed, we believe that all the individuals have, by now been executed. We never found the remains.
On December 1st, 2005, the Dallas Morning News published a photo of the scene. The drug war was now a major problem.
I think it became known worldwide that there was something horribly wrong. Before that, they hid it very well. The residents knew, the people of Laredo, Texas knew, and the people of Nuevo Laredo knew. But the rest of the world didn't pay much attention.
Then, in January 2007, U.S. authorities extradited Gulf cartel boss OCL Cardenas to the United States. He was charged with drug trafficking and attempting to kill both DEA and FBI agents. He was put in solitary confinement. Los Zetas saw an opportunity to seize control of the Gulf cartel.
Over time, this group realizes that they become very powerful in themselves because they are the most violent.
Los Zetas, who for years took orders, did something extraordinary. They shattered the gang's hierarchy and started calling the shots.
You might as well even say now that the Zetas are really in the control. They're really the ones in control right now of Nuevo Laredo.
Los Zetas, these military-trained killers, were once the hired guns of Mexico's Gulf cartel. Today, they are calling the shots.
The soldier has become the general, in this case. It's a hostile takeover in many ways.
In Mexico, Los Zetas have erected altars on roadsides, in public buildings, and town squares. The Zetas leave gory tributes. The sacrifices are usually in the form of rotting animal heads or shriveled melon garnished with beads and feathers. These offerings are to Santísima Muerte, the saint of death. Banned by the Roman Catholic Church and revered by those who practice black magic, Santísima Muerte is traditionally depicted as a female Grim Reaper. Some petition her in times of sickness. Los Zetas prayed to her for survival and protection.
It's pretty famous in Latin America, but they've taken it and they've twisted it into their own thing.
They know that what they do, it's illegal, they know it's a sin, so they only hope that Santísima Muerte, which their patron saint, is going to protect them when they pass away.
The Zetas know an early death is a common fate.
They're disposable. You know, it's like a razor. Once you're done using it and its edge is gone, you get rid of it.
Los Zetas operate an efficient machine from the top on down. The leader of the Zetas works with a team of regional commanders. They then dictate orders to small tactical units of Zetas called Sicarios. On both sides of the border, Sicarios first carry out surveillance, then assassinations.
In order for the Sicarios to kill someone, they have to find that person first. They have to know where they live, what car he drives, who he lives with. Does he have a family member who is a policeman?
Rosalio Reta, an American, was assigned to one of two squads that carried out killings in Laredo, Texas. Reta was 13 years old when he joined the Zetas. He became what's referred to as a Zetilla. Zetillas are handpicked for their age, connections, and capacity to kill.
What we're seeing is the recruitment of young children, as young as 13 years old like he was, usually from poverty-stricken families, usually kids that are on the edge.
They want individuals that can move into society, very comfortable operating inside the United States, has a support and logistical base here, speaks the language, can move in and out, knows our social norms.
Initiation into Los Zetas is simple. Zetillas must murder someone at point-blank range.
They put a 45 in your hand, and they put somebody kneeling down next to you, and they say, shoot him. Shoot him in the head.
Once a Zetilla has proven he can kill, the Zetas will send him to one of their training ranches.
They'll use all military type of training, explosives, hand-to-hand combat, physical training, push-ups, running, all the type of training that a U.S. soldier will go through.
They're taught how to use high-powered weapons. They're taught how to manipulate and use cell phones, how to take out SIM cards so that it won't be traced back.
Their ability to kill in cold blood isn't enough. Prospective Zetas also must prove their mental strength.
You are tortured by them, so you learn what torture is like. You have to be able to withstand pain and not divulge the information you have that they want. There are many types of torture: breaking bones, cutting the person, burning him alive, removal of your nails one by one, pulling of your teeth, cutting of your ears.
If a Zetilla can't cut it as a killer, he'll be trained in another capacity, like drug trafficking or recruiting. When a Zeta leaves training camp, he has a variety of deadly tactics at his disposal. The most famous is known as Plata o Plomo.
You surround the commander and then approach him and ask him plata o plomo. It's a decision. Either you work for us and make money, or you die. If he does not pull, you're going to kill him right then and there. And after you kill him, all of his soldiers are going to work for you from that moment on.
It's a persuasive tactic.
If you are an elected official in Mexico, a public official, a cop, a federal agent, a prosecutor, you either get on board with the cartels or you die.
People could not call the police if there was a fight in the middle of the streets of Nuevo Laredo and say, please, there's somebody out there with a bazooka and he's just blown up a house and they're continuing to fight and they just kidnapped a girl right in front of me. There's no way they would call the police because the police were in on it. And everybody knows it.
We've always known that Mexican authorities were corrupt to a point. You don't know who to trust, who not to trust.
The Zetas are infamously brutal. Another tactic is called El Guiso.
Basically, they put a person to a 55-gallon drum. They'll fill it up with either diesel or gasoline, set it on fire.
They keep on adding pieces of iron that are chopped to keep it hot so it keeps on burning. Depending on the size of the person, if a person of 250 pounds, it's going to take 8 hours. A person of medium height will take 4 to 6 hours, depending on his size.
The authorities say that most victims of El Guiso are dead before they are burned. This Zeta, who's taken part in such killings, insists that's not always the case.
If they were making fun or they did something serious to us, we'd burn them alive.
It's just one more way Los Zetas are making sure that no one, not even authorities, dares stand in their way.
They're so terrified that reporters aren't telling the stories anymore in Mexico. Police officers are refusing to do their jobs.
In Mexico, Los Zetas, one of the most ruthless drug smuggling gangs in the world, appear invincible. They've spent years perfecting their brutal methods to gain control of Mexican authorities.
They've put them in acid and watched their bodies disintegrate. They have fed them to wild animals.
The Zetas are expanding, bringing their terror-filled tactics across the border.
They can attack us in a blink if they like. I like to say there's a way to stop them, but there's no way to stop them. We can only deter them.
In 2005, they unleashed a series of killings in Laredo, Texas that shattered the city. Moises Garcia was gunned down outside a crowded restaurant during lunch hour. 1 month later, Noe Flores was shot in his brother's driveway. Then, Jesus Resendez and his nephew were murdered in their car while sitting at an intersection. Laredo residents were terrified.
There's always been fighting among gangs, but the way these guys were doing it is too public, it's too vicious. There were no boundaries for these individuals.
This homicide detective, Lorenzo, asked to have his identity concealed. He was charged with investigating the Zetas' activities in Laredo. In short time, he was able to link the Laredo killings to the Zetas. He zeroed in on the young sicarios, or hitmen, who were responsible. One was 16-year-old Rosalio Reta. Lorenzo identified Reta as the triggerman in the Garcia shooting and the driver of the getaway car in the Flores killing. The detective began tracking the Zeta assassins. It didn't take long before the hunter became the hunted.
They were following me. They were planning either to kill me or pick up a member of my family to stop us from investigating them.
In May 2006, the case broke when Reta made a critical error. He defied Zeta orders and went to Monterrey, Mexico to take out a Mexican mafia member. He shot up a bar, killing 4 and injuring 25 people. The Zetas were out for blood.
In retaliation for what he did, he was actually kidnapped by his own friends, taken to a residence and beaten and tortured. And he was actually told he was going to get executed.
Somehow, Reta managed to kill 2 of his captors and escape. Then, he turned himself in to Mexican police. While being held in a juvenile facility in Monterrey, Reta called the man pursuing him in the U.S.
He actually called myself, called federal authorities in the U.S., requesting to be extradited because he was feared of his life. He was feared that they were going to kill him. The Zetas were actually going to execute him.
Lorenzo flew to Monterrey, Mexico to take custody of the teen assassin.
I'm trying to picture him before I even met him. I mean, he's got to have some big cojones. But then I see him, like you said, 5 or nothing, just a kid.
Once in custody, 17-year-old Reta confessed to 30 murders, many in graphic detail.
Me gustó lo que hice, quebré la primera persona y me gustó. Me creía Superman a la verga.
¿Por qué?
Porque ya mataba a alguien.
La primera, ¿cómo te lo pusieron? ¿Cómo lo metiste?
Una super de 9 tiros, 8 en el deseo y 1 en arriba.
Presenté 4 en el pecho y 5 en la cabezota.
Investigators were shocked at Reta's callousness as he spilled details of his many gruesome crimes.
Rogelio Reta is one that I can tell you never showed any remorse. Didn't think what he did was necessarily wrong. He was just carrying out orders and carrying out his task. Probably perhaps most troubling was that he relished in it. He actually enjoyed doing this.
Yo voluntariamente, yo lo mato. Ah, Chile, presta. Tu madre, que se duerme el gallo malo. Y pues todo, pues, se hizo como un guion de James Bond. Como un juego de James Bond.
He compared himself to James Bond, sneaking around these individuals, doing surveillance on them, and then walking up and shooting them in the head. You see a kid that don't care about life. You see evil in his eyes.
With their cleaner, Reta, locked up, investigators seem to be making progress in the war against Los Zetas. William Slaymaker, however, was having little luck discovering the fate of his stepdaughter. Yvette Martinez and a close friend had not returned to Laredo, Texas after attending a concert in Mexico. Slaymaker began to look for the young women and found frightening evidence.
She didn't disappear off the face of the earth or fall off of it. She was kidnapped. I found her car. It was at an impound lot owned by a Mexican federal judge.
Slaymaker was told that the Mexican police had pulled over his stepdaughter and her friend, then turned them over to the Zetas. Slaymaker refused to give up. Hoping for a new lead, he began publicizing Yvette's kidnapping in the U.S. In 2005, Slaymaker told his story to America's Most Wanted. Just 30 minutes after the broadcast, Slaymaker received a phone call from his house.
I hear my kids yelling in the background, scared. And my wife says, you know what? A DEA agent by the name of so-and-so called us and told us to get out of the house, that there's 15 commandos coming to kill us.
Since 2007, Los Zetas have set up their headquarters just south of the Texas border in the middle of Nuevo Laredo. Some estimate more than 1,000 people have been murdered in Mexico's Laredo corridor. The town is under siege.
The people they killed were people that did not want to join them or become allies. That's why they were killed. The Zetas control this town.
And they show no signs of slowing down. A man named Lescano is believed to have taken the reins of Los Zetas. When the heat gets too close, he simply crosses the border into the U.S.
How does a leader of a narco-terrorist organization, safe haven in the United States, with Homeland Security and our global war on terror? I don't know the answer to that question.
Los Zetas are steadily moving into the U.S., planting hitman squads across the country.
Chicago, Atlanta, California, Florida, Washington, Texas, everywhere.
Sicario cells, we believe, are all over the country. We have dismantled several here in our city, but we're not going to kid ourselves. There's still sleeper cells. There's people waiting to be given orders to commit a homicide.
It's a frightening development.
What average street cop is prepared to deal with that kind of violence here in the United States? And I'm not belittling them. I was a street cop at one point. You're not thinking like that. You're not thinking from a military tactical perspective when you're out in your patrol car.
There's another trend that disturbs authorities. Los Zetas are infiltrating American street gangs, including the Latin Kings and MS-13. They're controlling the gangs, using them to traffic drugs, and training them to be even more vicious.
That's how they move their dope. They move it through the criminal gangs here in the United States. You have somebody not playing ball in New York City or Chicago, you give the order to have that person kidnapped or beat up or killed. and you give that order to the criminal gang here in the United States.
If the Zetas want to kill somebody in the United States, once the order given is received, it becomes a question of hours, and at most, 1 or 2 days, and the job is done.
You and I open up your morning newspaper and say, oh, that's terrible, another drug dealer killed. Most people don't care. They fail to recognize that the order for that assassination of that drug dealer came from a foreign country that borders ours. And yes, it may be that drug dealer today, but it may be the police chief tomorrow.
The Lone Star State's prisons, already crunched for space, are filling up with Los Zetas. American authorities have already broken up 2 Zeta hitman crews in Laredo, Texas. After turning himself over to Texas authorities, teenage hitman Rosalio Reta was convicted in the Noe Flores killing. Texas police were able to match fingerprints on a pack of cigarettes to the getaway car. Reta was sentenced to 40 years in prison, but has filed an appeal. Detective Lorenzo predicts the Zetas will end Reta's life, whether or not he's in prison.
There's a contract for the hitman now. So I guess shoes on the other foot.
For the Zetas to lose one person in the chain is immaterial. For them to lose someone who is bringing money to them, it's like losing nothing.
For every Zeta who ends up dead or behind bars, there is a network of criminals eager to advance their agenda.
It's really unfortunate, but it's gotten to a point where really our Border Patrol agents, the Mexican officials, our DEA agents are up against armies.
Those who dare stand up to the regime of terror do so at their own risk. In 2005, William Slaymaker publicized the kidnapping of his stepdaughter Yvette on America's Most Wanted. Within an hour, 15 Zetas were headed across the border to his Texas home to kill him and his family. The assassins never made it there. Mexican authorities intercepted them before they crossed the Rio Grande. Slaymaker's family escaped with their lives, but they've been robbed of their peace.
It has affected everything I do in life from now on. I mean, everywhere I go, I'll go to a restaurant, I'll never give my back to the door or to a window. I always have to see what's going on.
Even so, Slaymaker refuses to back down. He has started an organization to publicize the Zetas' kidnappings in Texas. It's called Laredo's Missing. By his count, nearly 40 American citizens have been abducted by the gang, and the number is growing.
It's scary to think that one can walk across a bridge and that's it. Nobody cares what happens to you over there.
Slaymaker has been warned repeatedly by Los Zetas to stop talking, but he refuses. His stepdaughter is still missing. He won't quit until he finds her.
Fear alone will not deter me. I mean, I've always said that if I have to lose my life for my wife to get the answers to our daughter's disappearance, then so be it.
U.S. authorities are concerned about Los Zetas, but admit they don't have all the answers. For starters, they need better weapons and more manpower at the border.
The Zetas, they outgun us, they outpower us, they outnumber us. That's why Border Patrol is always recruiting to get more people. That's why we need more money down here in South Texas to hire more law enforcement officers.
Those would be only temporary solutions. To put an end to the gang, experts insist it will take a concerted effort between the U.S. and Mexican governments.
If you're going to combat it properly, it's going to have to be the Mexican government and the United States government that ultimately will be able to handle this.
The Zetas insist the violence cannot be stopped, that death has become too deeply ingrained within the Zeta psyche.
Plata or plomo means life or death. It's either you or me, or it's your life or mine, or your territory or mine. That's what it means. There's no conscience in the mind, and it captivates the human, and you no longer think retroactively. You act without conscience. That is what happens.
No one is going to take them out. They are not going to be able to do it. Never.